Rafael McConan from Save the Children. Um, Forgive me if these are simple questions, but one on intellectual property rights, it was said that it doesn't apply in developing countries. So when you have a theoretical farmer that's in a value chain that might be exporting, does that mean the intellectual property rights may not apply if you're exporting to a non-developing country? And two, there was a cost-effectiveness study that was cited, and I was just wondering what that compares it to, because usually they have a comparison compared to nothing, compared to supplementation, compared to a more diverse diet. And so what was the actual comparison that led to the DALI number in the end?
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question back here.
Thank you. I'm Kenneth Hoadley from Apt Associates. I'm concerned about the issue of color independent from taste. There is evidence from other crops that color is an important factor in acceptance, and that consumers reject or have rejected in the past new products just on the basis of color, even if there's no difference in taste. How do you intend to address this issue?
Okay, Lorian, right in the back there. Then we'll come over to this side.
Hi, Lorian Univer, currently with USDA. So I had a question about following up a little bit on that, about the how it's envisioned that the commercial production in a few years will be directed. And two related questions. One, do you see this as kind of a niche development where Helen Keller International, for example, might develop children's foods or something and contract with specific farmers? Or do you see this as something that would be taken up more broadly and marketed, you know, to whoever was interested? And if taken up more broadly, do you think there will be concern about segregating the supply chain? Obviously, if it's safe, if it's nutritional, it doesn't matter if you get, you know, rice that would be mixed, you know, orange and white, and might even be fun and pretty and all of that. But it might be that farmers would have trouble selling that, or that might might have a discount in the market. And so, has there been any thought to the potential need for segregating marketing chains?
Okay, David.
Yeah.
Any other hands up?
Thank you. My name is David Spielman from IFPRI. That's a very good segue also to my question. And we're talking about delivery and dissemination type strategies for golden rice. So I guess we're about 5 years or maybe even less down the line from that, or up the line. So you've showed that golden rice is being developed in a varietal background, using many of the most popular rice varieties developed by IFPRI and the public research systems in Asia and elsewhere. So this is maybe a random thought, maybe relevant. How are you going to tackle the introduction of golden rice when, where, and if, say, rice production is based largely on hybrid rice, which is really a private sector phenomenon? And I realize that hybrid rice is not very popular outside of China, but in China, for instance, it accounts for 65% of cultivated rice area. In Vietnam, in the north at least, you were saying it's growing. In India and Bangladesh, it's less than 5%, but it is still growing, and it's certainly a private sector phenomenon. So, and it's difficult to map the market segments to say that, you know, varietal rice is consumed by the poor who are vitamin A deficient, and hybrid rice can be grown and consumed by the rich, because that's not the case, at least at present. So what are your thoughts about how to introduce vitamin A rice or golden rice if hybrid rice becomes one of the dominant products in the market?
Thank you. Do you have other questions on this side? Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Olivier Ecker with IFPRI. Adrian, you showed a number that golden rice reduces the mortality rate between, I think, around 20% or something like this. It would be interesting where this number is coming from, because I remember other figures from the literature.
Okay, any other questions right now? Maybe let's let Rob answer that last question. Rob Russell answer that last question, and then I'll start with Gerard this time and come this way.
The figure of 23, I think, to 34% actually reduction comes from the latest meta-analysis of the 9 large intervention studies. and reported by Summer and Keith West and others. But that's where those figures come from, and they're pretty well accepted now, that at least 20% number is quite well accepted.
It was the vitamin A supplements would produce those mortality rate reductions, not golden rice. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll start with Gerard, and we'll go through the questions.
Okay, so Adrian will answer the question on IP rights, and I'll take on the color question. So yes, the question of colored rice is actually been very important and top of mind for the project for quite some time. First of all, there are colored rices already out there. Sometimes they're festive rices. They're made by, or the varieties that are colored, or they're rices where colored compounds are added, such as turmeric or yellow margarine in the Philippines. So we've done most of our work so far in the Philippines, and we conducted a very, very large, and I mean very large, focus group discussion that Adrian alluded to in 4 parts of the country in 4 languages, both Muslim and Christian areas, in areas where vitamin A supplementation programs were active and weren't active. And one of the questions we probed was color. And we got based on reactions in a focus group discussion of what people thought of color and what color meant to them, etc. We've now gone back in a very similar, very large size quantitative survey run by a commercial consumer research firm, and probed now in a quantitative way. And the color of rice is intriguing. It's not a negative. So right now it's not a showstopper for us. We can explain the color because it's the proof of the nutritional improvement, and that's become hugely important as part of the message testing we've done, and we're going to continue those reiterative qualitative and quantitative studies for the next couple of years on that and other questions to secure the consumer acceptance of golden rice in the Philippines and also in Bangladesh. And we're going to start the quantitative phase in Bangladesh this year. Sorry, qualitative phase.
Now, I'll just mention quickly on the color issue with our orange varieties in Africa. If you give them an orange variety and you don't give them any other information, they'll probably reject it. But if you then give them the nutritional message, they don't. They like it. The question is how to do that at low cost. How you can convey that information at low cost. So, Adrian, do you want to take the question on intellectual property rights?
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely recall the question. I know it was about IP rights and golden rice, and basically there is no IP that's important here. The only thing, all the rights that we need are in the, we have the rights to for the humanitarian project. The humanitarian project is defined for developing countries, for resource-poor farmers, and it doesn't include commercial rights, and it doesn't include rights in, for example, in North America or in Europe, where there isn't vitamin A deficiency to be addressed by this. So, can you just remind me what specifically your question was? Because I fear I'm missing it. I know what it is.
Farmers that are in the value chain and that they would.
Local sales are allowed under the license. Replanting is allowed. Export to other research organizations for use in the humanitarian project is allowed, but commercial export is not allowed. And there's a definition between so-called resource-poor farmers and commercial farmers, which is $10,000 a year from farming. Nobody's going to know precisely how that figure is reached. But if there's a farming group in a country that wants to grow this commercially, we don't have those rights. They would need to go back to the holders of some of the rights, which is Syngenta. They own commercially the inventor's rights, but they don't have access to all the other rights that the humanitarian project has access to. So if those are relevant, the commercial farmer would need to approach other groups. And that maybe addresses the processing question too. The idea of this rice is to be used unprocessed, in line with the 1992 UN nutrition meeting that decided that the first tranche of attack for nutritional improvement should be food, and then only subsequently, if you couldn't get the right foods, supplementation. And we're not talking here about processing. The beautiful thing about rice is that it's basically unprocessed and eaten as it is. So we're not planning for this to be a processed food. Maybe some people will do something with it, but the idea, and I think all the parties involved will interpret this resource poor farmer definition pretty generously, but if it's clearly a multi-billion-dollar rice producing company that's shipping to somewhere outside the developing countries, then those companies will need to take their own decisions about who they ask, but we don't have the rights to that activity. Does that answer the question? Okay. And then there was an issue about cost effectiveness. What was the cost effectiveness? Was that your question too? Yeah, in the Alexander Stein. The different comparators there were either supplementation or vitamin A capsules or golden rice as a source of vitamin A affecting a disability-adjusted life year. So how much money did it cost with each of these different interventions? In the case of golden rice, a projected cost. To address those interventions. And the low cost for the biofortified crop in golden rice is because there is no cost of a capsule, there's no cost of distribution. Once you've paid all your development costs up front, the costs that we're involved in at the moment and that our sponsors are helping us with, the supporters of the project, basically the rice costs exactly the same for the farmer or the consumer as any other rice.
Okay, there was a question on during the rollout of the golden rice, do you expect it to be just part of the general rice supply, or do you expect it to be kind of a niche product?
So we've got seed plans developed at this stage for both Philippines and Bangladesh, and these seed plans are aligned with government policy to produce high quality seed, certified seed or truthfully labeled seed for farmers in both countries. So the distribution system for golden rice we expect largely to go through the standard seed system. By the way, and the multiplication system in Bangladesh involves both the private sector and public sector and NGOs, so it's a very diverse group and very large group. Separately, we're in the Philippines, we're exploring with farmer cooperatives who do targeted delivery to their regions and to their customers. So we expect we're not going to have a single window for delivery, and we'll work depending on regions and time of the project, stage of the project, location. We may have quite an interesting blend of approaches, and obviously we'll be monitoring which ones are the most effective for what we want to do. The question about, I think Adrian asked it about, is this going to be a processed food? This is a question from Lauren, and no, that rice is consumed whole, and we don't look at this being turned into a baby food or any sort of a meal or porridge. I mean, it may turn up in some porridges, but really that's still whole grain. On the question about hybrids, if I can go on to David's question. So hybrids probably aren't as successful as you've quoted all the time, all right? And they do have certain challenges of cost and productivity and sometimes quality and consumer acceptance. They're not off the table. They're never off the table. And there have been probes from hybrid seed companies to see would we be interested. Now, one of the dilemmas for the project is we have to get advice on whether that's a commercial activity or a public sector activity. But separately, David, just you have to remember that we plant the F1 in a hybrid, but we eat the F2. So you have to put the trait on both sides. So you got line selection on both sides to be able to deliver a product that isn't segregating at the level of consumption. So it's not off the table. We wouldn't bet on it for our maximum delivery because it really is too small a market at this stage, or a coverage. It may be some seasonal opportunities or something, but again, the cost of development will be higher because you have to put it on both sides for the seed developer.
I'd just like to add to that. This could be quite a thorny issue to resolve if down the track. It's not one that we, as Gerard has said, is right at the top of the agenda right now, but it does occur to me that if adoption of golden rice was significant, then it may be that all rice sellers, whether they're commercial or non-commercial, need to include this trait. And I would imagine that it would be good for nutrition and good for the private sector involved in the hybrid seed sales if they were allowed to put the trait in, for example, on the basis it didn't cost any more. You know, they may feel they need to put it in like a driver trait that you've got, Roundup Ready in corn in the US, you have to have it or you can't sell your corn seed. Could be the same, maybe, in the future with golden rice, and a hybrid seed company might say, well, we'd like to put this in. We have to manage the commercial rights issue, but I can imagine that, there's goodwill in all the stakeholders in this project. They all want to help with micronutrient malnutrition alleviation. So if we got to that point, that might be a way of resolving it, just to agree with companies, yeah, you can put it in if you want, but you mustn't charge any more for it.
Yeah, on that last point, ultimately, when the biofortification strategy gets accepted as a kind of business as usual, just like you require in some countries that salt be iodized, you can require that new releases have certain minimum levels of minerals and vitamins. And just as an example of private sector wanting to do this, there's lentils. About 95% of lentils grown in Canada are exported, and a lot of them are exported to Asia. The Lentils Growers Association in Saskatchewan is biofortifying their lentils, making them high in iron because they feel that'll give them a leg up on market share. They can say our lentils are higher in minerals than our competitors are. So they're funding, the Growers Association is funding biofortification work by the University of Saskatchewan. So we still have a few minutes. Is there other questions? Gary.
I'm Gary Ender, Apt Associates. I was curious about the Indian program because we started off talking about golden rice, and then it began to sound more like Harvest Plus, where you had multiple micronutrients. And what I'm asking about is how do you manage those objectives if you cannot achieve all of them over the same time frame? I mean, do you see bringing out an Indian rice with just vitamin A, if you can do that quickly, or are you going to try to get vitamin A and iron, or how do you manage that process of different priorities and objectives?
Shall I answer that, or?
Yeah, well, there's another question here. Let's see if we've got.
Keith Fugley from the USDA. Could you just speak briefly to the, do you see major regulatory hurdles in terms of getting, in various countries of Asia where you're hoping to roll this out in terms of getting GMO varieties approved?
Okay, those are two big questions. We only have 2 or 3 minutes left to go, so maybe I'll cut it off there.
Well, let me answer the first one, and Gerard will pick up the regulatory question. I'm not Dr. Rao, and I don't speak for the Indian government, so and it's a pity he's not here because I'm sure he'd enjoy answering that question. But our general approach for golden rice in terms of putting it with other traits is to try and get it registered as a single product first. It's relatively easy then to integrate it, i.e. breed it together with rices that have other traits, for example, high iron or high zinc or anything else. The Golden Rice Project is under its own way, but already there is a big commitment in India to other programs on supplementation and fortification of foods through breeding and all sorts of other things. And, it's a big country. There's going to be a lot of activity. So I think for this project, we're concentrating on golden rice first, but there's a hope that we can stack it with, Harvest Plus is looking, I think, at high iron, high zinc in rice, and we can add those things together through breeding as a sort of product pipeline later on once we get the golden rice there.
So I will just finish up that answer. I'm also the head of the Harvest Plus rice crop team, and we have a zinc target and an iron target. Our plan is to validate each of these separately and then combine them after they've been validated separately. So yes, we do not want people to have to choose between a high zinc or high iron, high beta carotene rice. The ultimate package is all three together, but we need to validate all three, and we're doing that in parallel. And the question about regulatory constraints. The countries we've chosen are for a number of reasons. In the Philippines has a very active food feed processing for import approval process, so it's got a very active regulatory system. In addition, the Philippines grows 7 different GM maises, including stack traits, and has done so since 2003 or 4. And the government policy is to support the use of modern biotechnology safely for national development, and that shows up not just in policy but also in practices. Bangladesh has very advanced projects in both late blight resistant potato and in BT eggplant or brinjal, and they are nearing the last stage of regulatory approval. The regulatory data have been submitted for safety assessment. So the prognosis of those countries are committed to the adoption of safe modern biotechnology to improve the consumer or farmer productivity.
Okay, we've come to the end of our time. I'll just maybe as a final comment, I'll go back to what Gerd F. Kusch said. Very rapid adoption of modern varieties. It only took 25 years. So this is you know, when you're combining agriculture with nutrition, it's a slow-moving ship, but it has huge impacts. Once you've introduced these technologies, they're there year after year after year. They're worth billions and billions and billions of dollars in economic returns. But you have to have the patience to stay the course and invest in those activities up front.